Welcome to Home Education Matters, the weekly podcast supporting you on your home education journey. Hello and welcome to Home Education Matters. And today I'm joined by Jo Moorcroft, and we are going to be discussing what dog behaviour training can teach us as parents, or what sort of things that we can get from dog behaviourism. And obviously it's advanced hugely in the last 10-20 years, and how we can apply some of these principles to our parenting approach. And a quick disclaimer before I carry on with the podcast for anyone who is slightly freaking out already at this: in no way are we comparing children with dogs, although I love dogs very much, but in no way are we comparing the two. And neither are we trying to imply that you should be seeking the same kind of levels of obedience, or that you should be going for a purely manipulative behavioural approach with your children. We just thought it would be, Jo and I thought it would be interesting to have a podcast to see the things that we've learned as parents of dogs to compare with the things that we've learned as parents of children, because there are differences, but there's a certain amount of common ground, I think. So we thought it would be a fun podcast and perhaps, thought-provoking. And so first of all, Jo, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today, and do tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you ever so much for inviting me. And yeah, so I have been doing animal behaviour and specifically dog behaviour for the best part of, coming up to about 10 years now. And I became a parent to two young boys. So one is nearly 2 and the other one will be nearly 4. And through all of my years of doing animal behaviour and specifically dog behaviour, it has really made me start to be more aware of human behaviour. And it's just got me thinking on a whole different level, to the point where I will actually thank being a dog behaviourist to leading its way to my choice to then home educate my boys.
Oh, now that's an interesting one. So how has being a dog behaviourist led you to want to become a home educator? Because I suspect a lot of home educators listening would think that doesn't equate to them, because obviously in our mind, home education is all about freedom and choice and autonomy. Although obviously, again, another disclaimer, there's like as many ways to home educate as there are home educators, and every route is just as valid as the other one. But tell us how you went from your dog behaviour research and your sort of experience of dog behaviourism. Dog behaviourism, is that a word?
Yeah, we can go with behaviourism. Yeah.
All right, let's go. Let's invent new words. And how that took you to making the decision to home educate.
Yes, so it's a great question. It is through understanding how, I think from working with animals, where whilst they can absolutely communicate, they can't communicate in the language that you and I do. It is not a spoken language. It is very much through body language. And for me, the practice over the years of working with dogs, with having to almost try and understand all of the emotions that they are going through, purely by looking at context, looking at that body language, looking at the relationship that they have with us as their human companion, it made me start to parent very differently. And I suppose you've got the one label of a gentle parenting approach. I would say that is very much the route that we are going down with our boys, and it is very much trying to understand. For example, if my eldest, so my soon to be 4-year-old, if and when he has his little moments, as they all do, of struggling with something, and then he may throw a car off my head.
not a real life car one.
Yeah, one of those nice little toy cars, although they still hurt. It is one of those moments where I think, prior to doing all of my behaviour work with dogs, it's easy to default to the human hardwiring of telling off, because you're angry in that moment in time. You are like, how dare you do this to me? And we take it quite personally. What I desperately try to do, and believe you me, this is still a work in progress. It is something that I have not yet mastered, but I am I feel like I'm 80% of the way there, and I still make 20% of poor choices. But yeah, so for looking at that moment in time and going, right, okay, what are you trying to tell me in that moment? Because you are clearly struggling with something. And if I punish by means of just telling you off, or removing said car, it's about trying to deal with that situation differently. Because if I'm presented with a dog that is behaving that way and I'm potentially going to get bitten, or they are just playing up and being a little bit silly through overexcitement or anything, then I have to go, right, okay, what is going on here? What's the crux of it, or what is causing that behavior, and how can I adapt my behavior choices to almost just relieve some kind of tension in the situation, and then learn from it so that we can prevent it happening in future. And the more and more I do it, kind of tying it back in with the home education side, is I already get comments from friends and family about how busy my boys are. Like they're two very active outdoor boys. They're busy. They live up to the typical boisterous name. They're loud. They're loving life. They're full of energy. And to imagine them sat behind a desk with certain parameters, kind of like constricting that freedom of movement. I compare that to dogs again, where we've got dogs in some home environments, or in some general environments as well, where we are constricting their natural breed traits as well. So it's always looking back to, what was this dog bred to do? What was this human designed to cope with? And yeah, just taking all those learnings and going, how can we do better? How can we be better? And for me, school just doesn't feel like a right approach for me personally with my boys. I would feel like I would be a little bit of a hypocrite if I sent them, with all of the coaching that I do for families with dogs.
So for you, it was the sense that your children's natural instinctive response to life would be inhibited in some way by the school experience.
Yes, absolutely. And that's a very eloquent way of putting my wobble.
No, I sometimes feel like my only job as a podcaster is to take 10 minutes of conversation and put it into one sentence. I should be a headline writer of some description.
I love it. I need more in my life.
So part of me, perhaps the controversial part of me that would like to write Daily Mail headlines as opposed to the Telegraph headlines, part of me wonders whether in some ways we could equate putting a child into a school with putting a dog into kennels, in that it takes them away from us and it also restricts their natural movements. Or is that a step too far in the controversial stakes?
No. It's so difficult because, yeah, it's a topic that is highly controversial. And there was a show on TV not long ago with a trainer that I am aware of, when I think the headline was how to train your child like a dog, or something like that. And it absolutely was not the intention that is what you come across. And I think this is where we need to be thinking about the shift in. So for me personally, one of my goals is to just get people thinking a little bit differently about their dogs, which in turn, I think it's about being that whole self-awareness of how your behavior choices impact another. And our dogs are sentient beings. They have emotion, they have feelings, and the way we choose to behave will have an impact on their behavior. And it's trying to move away from the old school ways of training dogs, really, where I think it is very much obedience driven. It is very much, you need to be, there's some theories suggesting that you need to be leader of the pack and you need to show them who's in control. And it's very kind of like an autocratic type approach, whereas actually I'm much more for a democracy. I'm much more going like, right, how can we almost live in this household together? How can we be a team? How can we actually work together as that parent-child relationship, that human animal relationship? We have to work together. It is not that one is better than the other. It is all about different skill sets and going, right, in this moment my dog has actually taught me this, and then in other moments I've taught my dog this. And it doesn't need to be an obedient sit down, stay, loose lead, all of this. We have to think bigger picture, and it's the psychology and the behavior side of it, not any kind of desire for control.
I think that's really interesting, because when you approached me about this podcast, it wasn't at all controversial in my mind, because I have a dog, and I have a reasonably young puppy, like 22 months, and we've done lots and lots of training. And for me, the idea that you would parent a child as you would parent a dog is a totally positive one, because I treat my dog with love and respect and autonomy. So, and that's exactly how I treat my children. So for me, it didn't seem like a big thing. But when you mentioned the headline, treat your child like you treat your dog, I think a lot of the negativity from that kind of preconception is based on the idea that we used to treat our dogs and train our dogs in a particular way, and training has changed. Now, I'll give you an example. Is I grew up in the 1980s, and it was all Barbara Woodhouse. I think that was her name. And it was a very old school approach, and it was all about obedience and getting your dog to do what you wanted them to do. And then when I got my first dog, which was about 10 years ago, I got some dog training books and watched some dog training videos, and it was all about the pack mentality. Leader of the pack, you're the head of the wolf pack, go into the house first, blah, 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 eat first, eat in front of them before you feed them, all this kind of stuff. And then when I got my puppy about 18 months ago, it had completely changed again, and was all about play and engagement and the relationship and equality, as you say. And so, because this has been my most recent experience of dog training, when you approached me about the podcast, I thought, yes, I can absolutely see how there's a crossover here, because the things I learned from my time with my dog are very much things that I put in place with my children. And that doesn't feel negative to me. That actually feels like a positive. So I wonder whether you think that it's that shift in training that you mentioned, that obviously we have a different approach now to dogs, that means that it's much more relevant to our lives as parents.
Yes, absolutely. I would say the last kind of 10 years of dog training it is starting to go into this more golden era of being more aware of the different types of training, and it is absolutely taking a shift in the right direction. My gut is that it's easily going to be another 50 odd years yet until everybody is talking the way I am right now. I know that there are a lot of trainers and behaviourists out there that are absolutely smashing it, and they're doing brilliant things. And I think it's really scary for us to kind of go out and start talking about this, because it is so controversial, and the backlash you can get from it is a little bit scary. But I feel that passionate about it that I know I'm not doing anything wrong, because it's from a place of love. It is from genuinely understanding. Like, I genuinely listen to so many books on child behavior. I've recently just finished Peter Gray's Free to Learn, and part of those books I'm going, am I listening to a dog book here, or am I listening to a child book? Because it taps into the behaviorist thing, or like the behaviorist side of it. And it's not about saying that it has to be this. It's taking those little pieces, those little nuances in each of those areas, and applying it in a way that makes sense to us. And like I say, for me, for working with dogs who I can't communicate with on a language level, we have to have an understanding through physical ability. And I would much rather that be through them identifying that I am a safe person to be around, I am a fun person to be around, rather than getting frustrated. Because we all know, like, when we get frustrated, our body language will change, and our dogs are very good at picking up on our body language, the same way I think our children are. I see my boys look at me very differently if I start to get angry, because my body will get a bit louder or stiffer. And just seeing that little glint in their eye, and I'm thinking, oh God, I'm doing it. I'm doing that human thing again, where it's hardwired in me to get frustrated and kind of do the things that we've all been done before, which is consequences to your actions. If you keep doing this, you will lose this. If you keep doing this, and tying it back into a school thing, we have detentions, we have blockers to try and stop people doing certain behaviors. Whereas I coach all of my families from the dog side of it, and it is genuinely starting to take this shift into how they're interacting with other humans in their life, of let's try and stop thinking what we don't want and start thinking what we do want. Because it's so easy for me as a behaviorist to go out and for people to say to me, right, I don't like my dog doing this, I don't like them jumping up, I don't want them to do this, I don't want them to be an aggressive dog, I don't want this, I don't want that, I don't want that. I'm like, great, What do you want? And people just don't know how to answer that question because they're like, well, I don't want any of that. And I'm like, but yeah, but we can't communicate what we don't want because you end up in this constant no cycle then. But we can communicate what we do want, and tying that all in with, I don't know, I try and envision my boys being sat at school, and I know the school will be going, well, I don't want you getting up out of your chair, and I don't want you interrupting the class, and I don't want you disrupting them, and I don't want all of these things because it's going to impact several other members within that group. And it doesn't take into account the individualistic learning. And again, we do see that with dogs. I have people say to me, well, I've had dogs all my life, or I've had a certain type of dog and I know how they work. But again, they're individuals at heart. They are very different, the same way that we all are as humans. I've got 2 huskies, they're the same breed. They are not the same dog. I do things differently with them. I have to look at their behavior and go, what do you enjoy and what don't you enjoy? What food do you like and what food do you like? And taking all of that into consideration and then just adapting it and blending it all together.
So would you say that one of the main reasons that you like that you get things from the dog behavior approach that you take into parenting is partly because dogs can't communicate with us, and then when children are very young, they're not also able to communicate with us verbally? And would you say that there's like a time period when it works as an approach, but then perhaps when the children are older and more able to communicate, that it's less helpful?
Yeah, it's another great question. It's for me, knowing that dogs, they kind of realistically, from a brain development point of view, they are similar to toddlers up to about, I mean, I think on average they say around 3 to 4 years old, but there are dogs that are nearer 5 and 6 years old, depending on how much you work them and just the type of dogs that they are. You know, there's examples of amazing collies that understand like thousands of words. But then I'd say average is your typical 4 to 5-year-old toddler. So the similarities there for me are, yeah, it is similar from a brain development point of view. You can see them trying to figure out what's going to work in their favor and how can we communicate in a better way. For me, it's starting to become a little bit more second nature on just my awareness on how my behavior impacts another, even to the point where me and my husband, we try and just be kinder to each other by looking at how our body language is telling the other something in certain situations. And we all know it, we all do it, but having that acute awareness of, oh, you're doing like a little body shift there, you're not comfortable in this situation, I don't need you to verbally communicate that to me, how can I help you either get out of that situation, or how can I assist you in it to make you feel more comfortable? And even just the language choices we use with each other. It's something my husband's always taken the mickey out of me because my clients start to sound like me with my language choices. So when our dogs are doing something that we really like, or they're just doing something and we've not necessarily had an impact in it, we'll go like, oh my God, look at that, was a really nice choice. That was a lovely choice. And it's that type of behavior rather than going like, oh God, no, I don't like that behavior. No, stop it, leave it, get down. All of the negative stuff. It's going, no, that was a really lovely choice. Well done. That's great. Awesome work. And you're almost kind of like coaching yourself to be a bit more positive. And then that just has massive impacts on everything and everyone. And certainly for me, with the age my boys are, I've been feeling a little bit run down of late because I'm also doing a behaviour degree at uni full time on top of the business and the kids and, you know, life in general. And I was a little bit run down and I could feel myself having a little bit of a shorter fuse, to which I saw the impact of the behaviour on everybody in the household. Like Darren and I were bickering a lot more. The kids were not making the best behaviour choices. And again, it's this language of like, they're not being naughty, they're not making the best behaviour choices because of the behaviour around them. And when you start to articulate in that way, I'm going, oh, what choices are we making here? Is it because of a reason? And I think that applies no matter what age the children are or the other humans you're hanging around with. It's being mindful of how you impact somebody else.
I think you're right, because I think as as a parent of two teenagers, I can safely say that even the most well-adjusted, articulate teenager will struggle to articulate their thoughts to you as a parent, and often to anybody, because they can't really get their thoughts in order themselves. Children try their very best, and even as adults, when we have a lot going on in our head, it's very difficult to articulate how we're feeling and what we're thinking. And so I think you're really right that it's about picking up on cues. It's picking up on your kind of intuitive sense of what's happening and how they're feeling and what they're going through, and then trying to work your way through that and think, okay, like, what is behind these behavior choices? What are the things that are triggering them? And one thing you mentioned that really resonated with me, which is definitely something that I learned from having my puppy, and bear in mind that I got my puppy when my youngest was 13, and so I'd had a lot of years of parenting, and it took me a puppy to realize this, is how much your mood and your body language and your tone is picked up by people in the house. And I think I had really underestimated that until I got my puppy. And then I saw that unless my puppy is some weird empath, and I don't think she is, dogs are very attuned to a sense of the mood of the house. And I thought, well, if dogs are like this, you can be damn sure children are like it too. And as an adult, I am very attuned to it as well. And so it made me realize that actually we need to kind of be aware of our own mood and how that's being picked up on. So I definitely have noticed that myself from dog training and from parenting.
Yeah. It's one of those really interesting things. Like, if you ever walk into a house and either a couple or a family, or there's just a tension,
There's a vibe,
and you're like, oh God,
yeah.
what's going on here? It's the same thing. And again, it for me, it all stems from being so acutely aware of brain development. So there's lots of science behind this as well. It is studying the brain so much to understand why we do certain things, how the brain actually chooses certain pathways to go, right, in this moment we're going to do this, and in this moment we're going to do that. And there's lots of human psychology that transfers onto dogs as well. So when I'm working reactive cases and aggressive cases, we have to look at the whole fight and flight choices and how they've become about, and how we are sometimes unintentionally encouraging that to continue rather than helping them see a different way out of it, because we all kind of reach that impasse ourselves where we're like, I actually just don't know what to do here. Your behavior is so out of control. I don't know what to do, which is why we then default to our hardwiring of just going, will you just stop it? Regardless whether that's dog or child, you or another human or like another adult, you get to that point where you're like, I actually don't know what to do with this, because no one's taught me how to either de-escalate the situation, or I've not practiced my own self-awareness on my behavior choices and how actually I can de-escalate this just by something that I do.
I think actually another thing I would say, just for anyone listening who has children the same age as Jo's children, which is that kind of preschool, cusp of school age, is that I can safely say as a parent that that was my worst parenting era, was that age. I made a lot of mistakes. I did a lot of things that I'm very ashamed of. And looking back, I feel that I was thrown into mothering with very little training, for want of a better word, very little sort of exposure to children, very little sort of awareness of what I was doing. And I made very bad decisions. And it's taken a number of years to get to a place where I'm now very happy and confident with my parenting. But I do think there's something about that particular age. And as you say, dogs are generally, brain development wise at that age all the time, where it's quite difficult to reason. There's a lot going on. You're exhausted normally, especially if I have two very close in age, sounds a bit similar to you. And there's a constant call on your time and attention. And I did find that age, I would just like to say to all parents of children who are like 3, 4, 5, and 6, it gets a lot better. Just keep going, because it honestly does get a lot better. It's such a difficult time. The toddler years, like 0, 1, 2, 3, I found an absolute dream. But yeah, there was just that little period in the middle where I did find it very, very challenging.
Yeah, and it's we're kind of entering into, so my eldest is nearing 4, and again I can already start to see just a slight behavior shift in him. Like there's a little bit of, I don't know, like he's finding his independence, and he's like, no, I'm quite happy doing this. I don't need to do what you say I need to do. And for me, this is that, it's that crossover to how I personally work with dogs, because I am not the type of trainer that will ever advise somebody to say that you have to be in control. It is not about, it's that partnership again. Like if I ask my dog to do something, everybody will always say, oh, my dog knows how to sit. I'm like, great. Why do they need to sit? But it kind of gets that brain going like, why do they need to sit? I don't know. Am I just asking for it for the sake of it? I'm like, don't know, possibly. Are you? Start thinking about why you're asking certain things of your dogs. So if I do find myself, because again, I'm only human, I do still make all of these mistakes. I am on a constant journey of learning. If I ask my dog to sit and she just looks at me, I'll go, actually, again, I'll question it and go, do I need you to sit? And are you able to make this choice by yourself? Yeah, of course you are. It's fine. You don't need to sit. Crack on. You do what you need to do. And similar with my eldest, like now he's finding his voice and his bit of independence. It's, am I asking him to do things for the sake of that hardwiring parent nature that just naturally flows through your system of going like, well, because I've asked you, because I'm the parent, you must do this. Why? And actually, does it matter if he has a little bit of air quote control at that moment in time? No, because that's life to me. I want to encourage them to go through life and go, yeah, question it if you need to, listen to it where you do need to as well, but find that balance of working together as a team. And yeah, just being considerate of that development and seeing how they do grow with age. And it's really interesting. And linking it back in with that language choice I was saying earlier, I'm modeling that behavior with my boys, because I hear my eldest now start to say things like, I didn't make a good choice today, mummy. I think I was a bit tired. I'm like, oh, well done, you're recognizing it though, so you're okay, you didn't make a good choice, but at least it was a behavior choice and it's not you. I think it's something that's come to light recently, and I can't remember where I was either reading it or I was having a conversation with someone about, again, how our language choices can affect somebody else. So if you're constantly calling someone silly, and they're the boys the age they do silly behaviors, but they are not silly. So it's, yes, your behavior choice was silly, that's fine in certain contexts, but then which silly are we labeling it? And it's all of this awareness of being able to just be mindful that it's a behavior choice. It's not you can change your behavior choice.
I remember when I was training to be a teacher like many moons ago, and it was just becoming the norm to praise behavior rather than, praise the process rather than the outcome. And it's funny because this was like 20 years ago. And even today, it's still not really got through to mainstream. It's really interesting because I was learning it as a trainee teacher 20 years ago. I've used it in my parenting all the way through. Every now and then I hear people mentioning it, but it's not become this very pervasive thing that I thought it would, that we need to stop saying, oh, that's really good work, or well done for your A grade, or oh, look what a nice picture you've drawn. And we actually need to be saying, God, it's so great how much time and effort you spent on this. I really admire the patience that you showed in sort of in your revision. And there is, even now today, it's still not this mainstream idea that we need to separate the behavior from the individual.
Yeah, no, and it's really interesting. So like I say, I recently re-enrolled back into university. I never did it in the standard trajectory route, and kind of going off piste a little bit, but kind of linking it in with that home education. My mother, when I told her that we were going to home education, like, why? And my sister's a secondary school teacher, and she's like, why? Why? What is wrong with the system? It never did you any harm, did it?
That's such a popular one.
Yeah. And this is where, for me, again, linking it back to dogs, I'm like, well, even 10, 15, 20 years ago, aversive methods was the choice of training. It was, and I've known it to be prevalent in, loads of different authorities, like certain police forces as well, where they are using, or they were, sorry, using choke chains and prong collars and all of this stuff to get the dog to obey, to do this by inflicting pain. And it's like, we don't have to do that. We know better. We can be doing better. And for me, this is where it's that crossover into the school system that, I've been out of the school system prior to the degree for about, oh God, like 15 plus years. And then I've done the odd like evening class type of thing. But re-enrolling into university, my gosh, I was like, and I've done it through choice, and I know what I'm getting myself into. And I'm sat there for 2, 3.5 hour lectures back to back, and it's death by PowerPoint. And I want to be here and I want to learn because I love learning. But actually, is this the best way? Even to the point where I am, and this is going completely off tangent now, but I'm on a roll. It's I've had to do some exams recently, and like, there is no way I have learned that information through the course of the semester. So I've crash revised 2, 3 days before because it's a memory test. And actually, I'm taking the bits out that I need in order to further my career and my own understanding, and then tying it all in. And now I'm trying to figure out, there's a reason why I've focused and I'm honed in on all this behavior stuff so much, because the crossover for me is just so obvious. But I think it's because of the way I approach it. So yeah, it's a whole big interesting mix in my head.
I think you're right, because I think that a lot of this whole conversation, the whole reason this conversation sort of comes about, is because dog training has advanced so much so quickly. Our whole approach to animals, actually, as a vegan, I can safely say that our whole approach to animals in society is changing. In the UK, I'll put it like that, right? Because I've been all around Europe, and it's definitely not the case there. But our parenting techniques, a lot of them are still quite old-fashioned. I think we had a bit of a revolution in the 1960s with Dr. Spock. Yeah, and there was the kind of super nanny kind of approach, which slightly, as I feel, was quite regressive, actually, as an approach. Yeah. And then as a result, nothing much has happened in parenting. If you parent in a different way, like, gentle parenting, attachment parenting, things like that, there tends to be a lot of sympathy for it right up until your children get to about 3 and 4. And then after that, it's like, come on now, come on, put them into school, stop co-sleeping with them. Why are you still carrying them around? That kind of thing. And there seems to be a lot less tolerance for that kind of thing as the children get older. And I think a lot of this reticence when it comes to revolutionizing our approach to parenting and education is exactly the argument that your sister said, which is that, well, I went through the system. It's like, it's as if older dogs are saying, well, I was kicked, and so I don't see why you should be trained with love when I was trained by being kicked in the head, and although hopefully that never happened. And I think there's a lot of that is because we've got a generational shift that can't happen until we've had a good proportion of a generation go through a system that is different to the current situation. And only then will that system, can people look back and say, well, actually, I didn't go through that system and that was better. And it was better that I didn't. Because I think at the moment, there's always going to be this comeback from people saying, well, I did it and look at me, it's all right. Or I got through it, and it's almost like they like a badge of honor, like, well, I hated it and it was awful, but it made me who I am today, kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know, like for me, I never felt that way. Like I try and look back over my memories of school, and in all honesty, I don't really remember the infant junior type. I remember secondary, and I hated it. But I hated I think the social navigation of it was the bit I personally struggled with. The classes I'd almost kind of like written off to a degree, because there's just so many. You're just like back to back, and you almost go into autopilot. But that social interactions with people in different groups and all of that became really tough. And again, I'm always tying it back to dogs, because there's this weird idea, and I see this all the time, and it'd be interesting to see if you did it with your puppy actually. When you're walking down the street, do you get your puppy to go and say hello to as many dogs as you possibly can in order to socialize them?
I absolutely do not.
Well done, well done. That is that's something that tends to happen though. And I've had people follow me going like, oh, I've just got this new puppy, can my puppy say hello to your dog, because we're trying to socialize them. And I start questioning people now when I'm doing my coaching events and everything. I'm like, right, so I'm just going to take my two, well, soon to be 2 and 3-year-old down the street. If I see somebody else with a child, I'm going to see if my child can say hello to their child, so that we can do the socializing aspects. I was like, why? It's weird. They're not going to suddenly be like an absolute recluse if we don't practice chucking them into a chaotic nursery so they get to practice all of these behaviors. Whereas with dogs, we seem to go, oh, you're a dog, you should get on with as many dogs as possible. In fact, you should get on with all dogs and all people and everything. So let's chuck them into daycare facilities where there are 30 plus dogs running around in a field. And then you moan at the behavior that you receive at the other end because it's convenient during the week when they come back tired. But then of a weekend, when you're trying to take them for a walk and your dog cannot disengage from all the other dogs out and about, you get frustrated. And it's like, well, they're practicing that more. So it's that mindset again of what are we teaching our family members? What behaviors would we prefer, and how can we set everybody up to succeed? I want my children to be sociable, I want my dogs to be sociable, but that doesn't mean that they have to go and do everything on a tick list. It's life. Let's navigate it, and let's learn skills, and let's be aware of our emotions. And it's the same for the dogs. I was like, if I can see that you're struggling in this situation, I will be your safe person and I will take you out of it.
That's very interesting. So would you say that for you, socializing isn't putting your child into a school so they can be exposed to like 30 other children of the same age, regardless of what the behaviors are, but it's more about teaching them their own interpersonal skills so that they're armed with those when they do meet people? And if so, and obviously it's not a puppy podcast, but as an owner of a puppy, would you say then that if you wanted to socialize your puppy, in inverted commas, that instead of just taking them to like any kind, going up to any kind of dog repeatedly saying, come and say hello to my puppy, that you would be concentrating on the good behaviors that you want them to have in the house?
Yeah, it's so there's elements of, if we're talking puppies, socializing to me, and again, it's this whole big controversial thing, because as a blanket generic statement, and I am not saying that everybody feels this way, but typically speaking, socializing does tend to carry this concept that it's about getting your dogs used to being around other dogs. My view on it is that our dogs know how to be dogs. They're dogs. It'd be like a dog trying to tell us how to be a human. We don't need that. They know how to interact with each other. But I think we can almost unintentionally, so with the best of intentions, create some of these chaotic behaviors. But that's not just from socializing. There's a whole other piece on need to look at the breed type and what they're bred to do, and all of this other stuff, and diet and medical conditions. It's a whole big holistic piece. But then with my children, I personally see them grow more from making meaningful connections and relationships with other people. That doesn't necessarily have to be the same people all the time. I like to think that actually my boys are quite sociable, in that we are able to go out and experience life, and they are not afraid to say hello and have a go at something. And for me, I think that's from possibly going down the attachment parenting style. It's one of these things, isn't it? It's like you're never going to actually know. It's like if I'd done you always want to run like a side-by-side comparison and go, right,
wouldn't that be great?
What I've done, or is it just who you are? So it's really hard to say, because I am very much that attachment. We do co-sleep. We do lots of things together, and I am very aware of giving them the skills to talk about their emotions and building them up, and trusting themselves and their bodies. Like my youngest at the moment, he puts the fear of life. He's going to be a stuntman when he grows up, I swear. He started jumping off the second step on the stairs into a ball pit that he pulls there himself, and you're like, but head first with no hands out. And you're like, oh gosh. But not discouraging that. I'm just saying, right, how can we do this safely? Or how can we, how can I assist you? And do you want assistance? And it all comes down to that partnership again. And I think that massively impacts their ability to go out into the world and have these social skills that are there, and interacting with different age groups as well. I see my eldest flourish when he is surrounded by different age sets. He currently goes to it's a child-led outdoor nursery. And it's going to be great because they actually offer flexi schooling. So as he grows, he's going to go there like 2 or 3 days a week, and then he's going to spend the rest of the time with us, which is pretty much what he's doing now. But just seeing him grow in being in that environment around different age children and adults and all these different interactions. And he sometimes comes to work with me and he sees me on these Zoom calls, and all of that is socializing.
I think you're right, because I think, you said there that dogs know how to be dogs, and I think children know how to be children, or actually children know how to be people. And one thing I've noticed as a teacher is that when children are very young, 3, 4, 5, they have a very instinctive ability to interact with each other. And obviously you get a certain amount of friction, but that's generally just because they're quite young. And so they're maybe not so good at sharing, or they're not so good at controlling their emotions. That's literally just an age thing. But they have an instinctive ability to be able to interact with each other. And as a secondary teacher, I noticed that in actual fact, that goes by the time they're teenagers, not because it naturally goes, but because school has removed it from them. It's taken away their ability to make their own choices. And it's basically said, okay, these are the choices I want you to make. These are the choices that get you like a smiley face on the board. These are the ones that will get you like missing your lunch break and things like that. And they end up not feeling confident about the choices that they would instinctively make with other people. And so they end up feeling really quite anxious and insecure about their choices. And that means that they then respond in ways with other children that they perhaps wouldn't instinctively and intuitively have done when they were younger. And I think that's one thing I find with home education. And obviously it's a home education podcast, so I am going to be saying how amazing home education is compared to how school is. So I apologize, right? Because obviously I'm going to be doing this. But one thing, my children have gone to lots of home education meetups, and they have never experienced prejudice. They've never experienced discrimination. They've never experienced what I would call like meanness, like mean comments. In actual fact, my daughter experienced a child who was mean to her when she was about 7, and he was a schooled child. My daughter also at a meetup recently experienced somebody who was making fun of an autistic child, and she was so upset and came back to me and said, that she had no idea that people actually did this, because she'd only ever been to home ed meetups, and this was a after school club. And in the home ed community, because we allow our children to interact how they would intuitively and instinctively interact with each other without this kind of rigidity. So the socializing, I feel that when you're in the home ed community, the socializing is of such higher value and higher quality because you meet all these different ages, all these different people, and you're allowed to make your own choices. It just feels like it's just so much more of an empowering experience.
Yeah, no, it's great. And honestly, I'm beaming with everything you've just said, because that is the experience I know I will get going into this home education journey. And for me, that's the desire and the fire in my belly, that I want people to start thinking differently about their dogs, because it's the same, it's behavior. It is not that, like we said at the start, this whole controversy of a dog is a dog, so you have to, do you know what I mean? It's almost like they're lower down on this peg. They're a sentient being. So let's start treating them with we all say that we're dog lovers, and we are. So let's start doing that shift with dogs that we're trying to do with the home ed community, and going, let's just think about how we can socialize differently, how we can start to think about their needs as well, not just what we want them to do. Like I say, they live in our homes. They're our best friends. They're our adopted children. They are a part of our family, and I want to be considerate of their needs. likewise that they need to be considerate of ours as well, because it's that partnership, but it's that shift in, you know, the equivalent of school in dog training is, I don't know, like these puppy classes or these certain classes where you maybe go to, you know, it's you get a puppy, you go to 6 or 8 week puppy class in a field or a village hall, you learn, you sit down, stay, bang, your dog's trained for life. And I'm like, well, no, actually, because where's the skill set to help them cope with life? Like, life is changing so much. Even I struggle to keep up with it. And certainly the kids are going to beat me on tech stuff in the near future, because I haven't got a Scooby-Doo on how to do it all. But it's the same with the dogs. Like, if we're struggling with life, how are they coping with it as well? Because the more and more we keep breeding, and which is a whole other conversation, but we're breeding for looks more and more now, and not taking into consideration the behavioral outputs that you're going to get. We're mixing breeds that have got two very different behavioral drives in them, and you're therefore creating conflict in this one being on a continuum. So it's, when do they choose which behavior side to listen to, and when is it appropriate to listen to their natural desire? Like I say, I've got huskies, so me teaching them to do a loose lead, which seems to be like, you know, it's a nice standard thing everybody wants their dogs to do. They're huskies, they're going to pull. So I have to compromise and go, we need to figure out how you can get what you need on this walk, and how can I actually tap into your desire, which is pulling. So I hate running, but actually I've taken up canicross because I love running with the dogs, because it's another teamwork exercise and they get to pull. So it's great. So then their compromise is, when we go on a walk, they're happy to slow down a bit because I'm giving them what they need. And this is, for me, the shift that aligns so beautifully to home education, that I can tap into those needs and that compromise and go through life and teach and actually genuinely get dirty in the weeds and figure it all out together, because it's forever changing. So let's figure it out.
And I think, you know, when you say about what do you need and what do I need, and I think that is so important, and especially if you have a number of children. I mean, you and I only have two, but I know quite a lot of home educators who have 5+ children. And I think this idea that, yes, let's find out what you need and try to do what we can, but let's also be aware of what I need as well, and let's see if we can adapt our behaviors to each other. So that leads me on, Jo, to my final question, and possibly the one that maybe my listeners feel like I should have asked at the very beginning, but I've been holding off on it. So don't worry, I was going to ask this question, because obviously I've done a lot of podcasts with unschoolers, and I know for a fact that there will be unschoolers who listen to this and say, do you know what? You're talking about all these behavior choices. You're saying, oh, you know, you made a nice choice today, and this was a good choice, and all. Who is deciding what these behavior choices are? Because surely, as a parent, you are basically, without sort of meaning to, or perhaps with me, perhaps consciously meaning to, you're deciding what behavior choices are good, in inverted commas, and what are bad. And so by doing that, you are taking away the autonomy from the child, and you're basically saying, you know what, that was a good choice you made today, because it's a choice that you have decided is a good choice, rather than a choice that they have decided is a good choice. How would you respond to that? Because I'm sure there are people listening who are going to be like, yes, I think that.
No, it's such a good observation, because as much as I say, yeah, it's about that language choice, it's more of that internal dialect. So I feel like I can say it to, I feel like I'm on the start of this journey with getting people to think differently about their dogs. So for them to outwardly verbalize a dog's choice is a really nice start of the shift movement that I am looking for them to acknowledge that you don't necessarily have to always go down this is what I don't want, and from a troublesome behavior struggle. With my children, admittedly, I did do this to begin with, because it's naturally what I do day in, day out. It's part of my behavior repertoire. And then I realized exactly that comment. I was like, oh, I don't want to encourage any kind of, it's a really weird one. It is not about getting the child to do what I want all the time. I want to see what they are interested in and all of this. So I actually stopped. And again, I'm only human, so I feel like I'm about 80% of the way there. I 80% have stopped acknowledging outwardly and verbally outwardly saying, well done, good choice, because ultimately it's the equivalent of those shiny stickers on a behavior chart. But it is more about, I like to use my please and thank you as an example. I think will answer this question. You start off with, trying to teach your children manners, because it's one of these things, again, where very similar in the dog world, everybody expects their dog to sit. Well, everybody expects a child to use manners. And you get these lovely phrases thrown out like, what do you say? What's the magic word? How do you get this? It drives me insane. So I try my hardest, and again, about 80, actually, I'm probably about 90% on this one. In our environment, we don't ask for it. If they miss it, okay, fine. I kind of take that as information and go, maybe I need to up my modeling a little bit more. So I will overuse a little bit of please and thank you, more so with husband rather than the kids, but also a bit with the kids if it feels natural rather than just laboring on it. But again, with me being human in certain societal situations, I do find myself going, oh, what do you say? And I'm like, damn it, why have I done it? But I will forgive myself, because I start to look at it and go, as long as I have got credit in my relationship account, any withdrawal like that, I'm in good stead. I've not gone into an overdraft. I'm in good relationship credit. So my bad. I'll do better next time. Let me put some more credit in the bank account.
When it comes to manners, I've never encouraged pleases or thank yous, and I've always just waited for them to organically appear. And when the children were younger, other adults would take it upon themselves to say, what do you say? Things like that. And I would turn around and I would say, no, we don't do that.
Yeah.
And honestly, the look on their faces. And now I have two teenagers who are really impeccably well mannered, and that's because they've just realized that actually that's okay, that's okay to do. It's not a power struggle thing. It's actually just a nice thing. And I think it does just organically appear. If you allow your child to make their own choices, they will invariably, if you trust them, make the best choices.
Yeah, exactly that. And I get comments all the time about how my soon to be 4-year-old, they can't believe his manners. And I'm like, that's great. I was like, it's because I've never asked for them. Or I've done it a little bit. And then I heard myself do it. I was like, oh, no. So for me, it's being aware of, again, it's all this behavior choice, but more so my own, and going, oh, look, I'm doing this thing that I don't particularly like in me. How can we kind of I want to give my boys the skills to just go through life that is going to ultimately result in the best scenario that can possibly happen for them, whether that's having setbacks, knowing how to come back from it, knowing that it's okay to feel all of these emotions as well, that they're not bad choices, that it's not a good choice as well. And yes, certain things I probably will say like, oh, that's not the best choice, if it kind of is tipping into that more undesirable behavior. Like, we're at that age now where there's a little bit of hitting and biting between sibling rivalry. And we go, oh, right, come on, that's not the best choice now, boys, is it? So on those ones, I probably do outwardly do it, but I have definitely stopped doing the more positive reinforcement side of it, or just doing it sporadically and going like, actually, yeah, that was really nice. If it felt natural enough for me to say it, rather than consciously labeling it a good behavior, if that makes sense, then I think that's okay, because that's just human, and we all like to, have a little bit of verbal praise. And even if it's just that was actually really nice, like, Clay, those manners were beautiful, like, I'm really proud of that, awesome work. And you can see him be really happy, but that's not all the time, so it doesn't become it's just that thing again that happens every time I say this. I get a pat on the back or a sticker chart or whatever it is. It's the natural joyous occasion that I don't know, they've just done something that's made you smile, and I think that's okay.
I think there's room for positive reinforcement with children. I know it's mildly controversial in some sectors of homeschooling, but personally for me, I'm a big fan of positive reinforcement. And like you say, it has to be authentic, and it has to feel like, yes, I'm thinking these things. I'm not just saying them. I'm actually thinking them. And so I think it's, in some ways, if you think that they've done something amazingly and you don't say it, the process, and you don't say, oh, how well they did something, it's almost almost tips into sort of manipulation, in that you're not saying something even though you really feel it. It feels a bit weird to me. And also, I'm a massive fan of honesty with children, and I always pride myself on being absolutely honest with my children, and I think it sort of links in with that if I'm not saying something that I'm feeling, that feels dishonest to me. One other thing I was going to say actually about the whole manners thing is that I wonder whether there's an element of us trying to create children, much as we try to create dogs, to fit into the world around them rather than vice versa. Because obviously, for example, if you have a neurodivergent child, manners is something that maybe, why should you have to teach your child to behave in a certain way or respond in a societally acceptable way? Because surely society is big enough and brave enough to take on people and dogs that behave in different ways. But I wonder, perhaps with dogs, whether there's a difference, because obviously they can actually sort of like jump up and bite you, whereas children invariably don't, or not after the age of about 5 anyway.
Yeah, hopefully not. Yeah, it is, and I think for me, this is where, you know, I'm having to put my big girl pants on and start having these conversations with people and going, we need to start thinking a bit differently, because, you know, all the things that we've been saying so far on this conversation, it is, we know more, we can do better, we understand how the brain works a lot more, and why is it a bad thing to start questioning what we've done previously? You know, there's so many different sectors out there, and certainly for me, being entrenched in the entrepreneur world and surrounding myself with business people that are doing amazing things, I kind of, I'm riding on the back of them, really, to have that confidence to go, no, actually, if we don't speak up, then what's going to happen? Like, nothing. And I think it is so brave for everybody listening, going on their home educating journey. You are doing the same thing. We are starting to buck the trend in giving you a choice and going, we know better, we should be doing better. There are enough literary pieces out there, there is enough research to support all of our decisions in choosing this home school route, yet it is still such a taboo subject. And it is the same in the dog industry. It is scary for people to talk out about it and go, because it's so easy to just receive slander for it, really, and go, well, why should you be doing something different? Like, a dog is a dog, and this is how we've always done it, so why change it? But for me, it's the same concept as home education, which is why I think, for me personally, the two tie quite nicely together.
I agree. And in actual fact, there's a home educators conference that's just taken place, and I was invited to do a speech, and I was going to do the speech on how home education is an inherent act of revolution, because it is so, we are trailblazing, and it is so revolutionary. So not just, there's so many approaches to home education, and they're all revolutionary. The very act of not putting your child into a school in itself is an act of revolution. And yeah, I mean, I think it is fascinating, and I think there's no doubt that with so many of these things, there's pushback, and there will be people who sort of question your choices. So I'm pleased to say that Jo will be joining me for a little short kind of bite-sized podcast where we will look at a particular element of your relationship with your dog and how it may enhance and improve your relationship with your child. So, for example, some things we'll be looking at are things like engagement, the role of the relationship, bucket filling. You know, you mentioned having credit in your account. I think that's a really interesting one. Practicing good behaviors and limiting negative exposure. And obviously the role of patience and understanding and intuition and reading body language and those kind of things. So we'll be doing like little mini podcasts on those kind of elements of parenting and what we can learn from sort of the most recent dog behavior training, which is, as I say, advancing so much all the time that it is definitely outstripping parenting research at the moment. So thank you so much, Jo, for coming on. Do tell our listeners where they can find you if they're looking for a dog behaviorist, or where they can find you if they just want to come on and chat or whatever, if you have any social media links.
Yeah, great. Well, hopefully I haven't put you all off and you all don't think I'm an evil monster that are teaching my kids to sit down, stay with some treats in a parking lot somewhere. So my company is Paw Education, Dog Training and Behaviour. Paw is in a dog paw for obvious reasons. Or you can just hit me up on socials under Jo Moorcroft.
Super duper. And Jo will also be in our Facebook group, and I'll put up a post for this podcast as I do for all the podcasts, and she will come on, she will put her links up there. Any resources that we mention in any of the podcasts as well always go into our Facebook group in the post for each podcast, and our guests are there to answer any questions that you may have. So if you have listened to this podcast and there are things you would like to say, good and bad, Jo and I have broad shoulders, it's okay, we can take it. Do come on the Facebook group Home Education Matters and tell us what you think. So thank you again so much, Jo, for joining us today, and looking forward to our little bite-sized chunk. Thanks so much, Jo.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us for today's Home Education Matters podcast. See you at the next one. Have a lovely day.